President Trump's much-anticipated first meeting in office with Russian President Vladimir Putin is just getting underway. We are just getting these pictures in right now. As you can see, they are sitting down at the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany. Let's listen now to the president.
President Putin and I have been discussing various things, and I think it's going very well. We've had some very, very good talks. We're going to have a talk now, and obviously that will continue. But we look forward to a lot of very positive things happening for Russia, for the United States, and for everybody concerned. And it's an honor to be with you.
Я очень рад с вами встречаться, и мы с вами обсуждали уже целый ряд вопросов, и будем продолжать обсуждать целый ряд вопросов. И я с нетерпением ожидаю такой возможности. Я думаю, что это все будет позитив как для России, для Соединенных Штатов, так и для всех. И для меня большая честь с вами встречаться.
Уважаемый господин президент, мы с вами в раз разговаривали по телефону.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, we spoke over the phone with you several times.
По очень важным вопросам международной повестки и международной.
On very important bilateral and international issues.
Конечно, телефонных разговоров недостаточно.
Well, phone conversation is never enough, definitely.
Если мы хотим решать вопросы двусторонней повестки дня, и наиболее важные, острые вопросы международной повестки, то, конечно, такие встречи лично необходимы.
But if we want to have a positive development in bilaterals and be able to resolve most acute international topics and issues, definitely we need personal meetings.
Я очень рад с вами познакомиться, надеюсь, что, как вы сказали, наши встречи принесут позитивные результаты.
And I'm delighted to be able to meet you personally, Mr. President, and I hope, as you have said, our meeting will yield positive results. Good news for us in the US.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There you hear from President Trump and the Russian President Putin with some short statements to the press before they begin a more extended meeting with the foreign minister and the Secretary of State also there as part of those meetings. But Trump beginning by saying it's an honor to be with you.
No, and Vladimir Putin following up, Fran, with, I'm delighted to meet you personally, which indicates, there have been conflicting reports on Donald Trump's side, whether they've met before or not. Vladimir Putin saying right there, I'm delighted to meet you personally. It was very difficult to hear over all the camera clicks and shutters. But what did you make of this? This is Fran Townsend, of course, our senior national security analyst, who's joining us at the table. You know this process.
Yeah, look, I think the initial press play that we just saw was what you'd expect. They're going to say they're honored to meet each other. They hope to accomplish a lot. We didn't get much out of that. The real conversation is now going to happen when the press leaves the room. But, it's interesting to me that Putin has set the table for this meeting, let's be honest. He sort of has arranged it so Putin can't lose and Trump can't win. It's not possible in the time allotted that President Trump can accomplish anything of real substance. And Putin, having just come out of a bilateral about a week ago with President Xi, has really come not just alone, but he's come and he's speaking with the authority of having had this very good bilateral with President Xi of China, where he's going to invest billions in Russia. They've had a joint statement on North Korea, and North Korea is obviously one of the topics high on the agenda, along with Syria and along with cyber. I think President Trump, whether or not he'll directly address the election interference, I think his way, perhaps his way of addressing that sort of softly will be to address Russia's cyber aggression more broadly, which is not only election interference, but Ukraine and Georgia.
Major Garrett, our chief White House correspondent, is also in Hamburg. He's been traveling with the president and speaking with White House officials. Major, are White House officials still saying there is no agenda for this meeting?
No agenda they're willing to discuss publicly, Nora. That doesn't mean, of course, there's no agenda. Clearly, the president has issues he wants to raise with Russia, Ukraine, because for the first time in Warsaw just yesterday, he described Russia's incursion into Ukraine, its acquisition of Crimea, not recognized by international community, as a destabilizing maneuver. He also spoke about that in the context of Syria. So those are two issues for sure, as is North Korea. And the president, in that quintessential television moment when everyone was trying to judge or make some sort of interpretation of the body language, as Fran Townsend accurately said, didn't leave us with much other than perfectly ordinary diplomatic pleasantries. But behind those pleasantries, these two leaders are going to have to try to take stock of one another. And as we well know, the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, prepares extensively for these kinds of encounters, tries to get the upper hand right away. The preparations for President Trump have been much more simple and straightforward. Don't try to achieve anything big. Pursue short-term U.S. objectives and don't make any mistakes. That is sort of the initial orientation for the White House going into this meeting. One last note to mention, Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, knows Vladimir Putin quite well as he knows the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. So the most inexperienced person in the room today will unquestionably be the President of the United States, because Rex Tillerson has a way to read Lavrov and Putin that the President, as yet, does not.
Major, if his friend says this meeting is set up so that Vladimir Putin can't lose, why does the U.S. walk in?
Well, because the Trump administration does want to get to this stage of at least beginning a dialogue with Russia. And there are very, very low expectations within the White House about this meeting. The president's only allotted 30 minutes. Now, a good deal of his schedule is wide open after that, so if the meeting goes well, it could last longer. But the United States knows it has to begin at least the process of establishing some kind of connection with Vladimir Putin, because let's say, for example, the case of Syria. If, in fact, ISIS's days are numbered in Syria, and there are a good number of U.S. officials and others who believe that it is, what happens next? Well, the Russians are very well positioned, I'm sure Fran can discuss at length, to be a big player in the post-ISIS future of Syria. The United States wants to get more involved in that, has to have a relationship with Russia to achieve that. And anything else that it wants to achieve with North Korea at least partially deals with Russia. That's another issue as well.
All right, Major, thank you. Fran Townsend was in the studio shaking her head to what Major was saying, Fran.
Yeah, look, Putin has said that Assad has agreed to early elections. Putin has given a good deal of thought to a post-Assad, post-ISIS Syria. And the United States is going to have to come with their own version of what they want that to look like and be prepared to compromise, because you're going to have to work with Russia on Syria just as you are in North Korea.
What is the risk for President Trump here?
Well, look, I don't think he can accomplish a lot. So I don't think there's a lot of downside. I agree you've got to start the relationship here. You wonder if he'll bring up something like Snowden. An early win for the president in this bilateral relationship would be a deal on Snowden.
And remember, 30 minutes, and translations included. There's not a lot of time to talk. Those of